Alright, Otter, I'm in. The store's got an electronic lock on it, though. Can you help me out with that?
Yeah, not a problem, Myth. The game I'm discovering this week should answer everything. We're discovering Sly 2, Band of Thieves. Released in 2014 by the ever-popular Sucker Punch, Sly 2 is the sequel to Sly... And that right there is why it's just called Sly 2. Since they hadn't originally realized how very naughty their original title was. I praise the game for being an excellent stealth-based game with innovative and creatively designed levels where it was a wonderful game that I just wanted to play more of as long as it was a Sly Cooper game. And whenever it wasn't, when instead it tried to be a twin-stick shooter or a top-down racing game or anything that was not you being a sly, sneaky raccoon, it was pretty bad to miserable to outright horrible. So did they learn from their mistakes? Not this thing! Nope! They made the sections I complained about in the first game less common, but I guess at this point they're considered a series staple and aren't going anywhere. They also added a bunch of new awful sections as well as some new and interesting ideas. The game starts out with a revelation. Someone has stolen the clockwork parts from the final boss in the first game. I thought it was supposed to be impossible to risk the lava bath to pull his parts back out from under molten rock, but someone found a way, I guess. Carmelita blames us because if she goes a few hours without trying to find a reason to see Sly, her own heart would shut down in protest. We protest that we have no idea what she's talking about, and the cop that came with her, Constable Neela, suggests it was the Claw Gang. I can say now that's a stupid name, since only one member actually has claws, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt. The first level finds us in Paris, hunting after an art-forging chameleon. Just like in the first game, these bosses are incredible. Their backstories are well thought out, and except for the baddest baddies, actually make them sympathetic. You're always aware that Sly could have ended up just like any of these guys if it weren't for his friends. With the right encouragement, any of these villains could have been good too. Dimitri would have been a great artist, but no one appreciated his new style, something depressingly common in the art world until after an artist's death, and angry at the world and depressed, he gave up and just made what the people clearly wanted. That is, more of what they already knew they liked. Each level revolves around an open hub world. Scattered throughout that hub world are bottles that you want to collect. If you can find every single clue bottle scattered around the map, you'll be able to unlock the hidden safe and get a new special move, just like in the last game. Big difference is it's all in the overworld you travel to again and again instead of in an individual level. At first I thought this was great, and I spent quite a long time wandering the quickly familiar streets of Paris for each bottle. Another big change is that the level progresses more like an actual heist instead of not really unified side quests in order to progress to the next area of the part you want to rob. The usual flow of events moves like this. You enter a map, get briefed on what you're doing there by Bentley. From the safe house, you head to a high point to gather surveillance pictures of the situation. Once those have been acquired, Bentley makes a plan. You'll have to do various types of missions to disrupt things and get set up for the big heist, such as disabling a security system or planting a bug in the villain's office to listen in. Then you'll have the multiple steps of the heist itself, such as actually sneaking into a tower, causing a distraction, or luring away guards. These various activities are helped by you playing as more than just Sly this time. Bentley and Murray are ready to step in and help out with the heist, each bringing their own skills to bear. I'll go more in depth with some of the levels later when the time comes. Getting to play in a world in different ways as each character is fun for the most part, as long as you don't have to play as Bentley. Well, I figured out what it wants me to do, but I'm not happy about it. Give me a minute. Alright, come with me. There's a trap! No! What was that?
Just a bit of my health, I'm fine.
Health? What were they thinking? Yeah, you have a health bar now. On the surface, this might seem great. There's lots of frustration in the original from missing the timing or misreading an attack leading to an instant kill and having to start over. But that was the point. You had messed up and died. It encouraged slow, careful movements and learning enemy patterns. I still can't tell you how some of the enemies move and interact with you, and that's only partially because I never needed to learn, when I could just tank the initial hit and kill them. It's also because, as a direct result of this single choice, the entire design of the game went downhill. Enemies and traps no longer had to be properly telegraphed. Solutions no longer needed to be intuitive and clever because you could mess up several times and it won't matter. Levels don't feel well designed or intuitive because they don't have to plan around this gameplay mechanic. This isn't too horribly felt at the beginning of the game, but the longer things progress, the worse it gets. This also leads to a much stronger emphasis on combat instead of sneaking. For Murray, that's great, that's what he needs. For Sly, it takes away more of what I loved this series for. If you're Bentley, there is no combat option. You're supposed to use sleep darts to immobilize enemies and safely move past. Except there's too many overlapping enemies, all surrounding enemies are alerted when you shoot a dart, hit or miss, and the darts really just like to pass through the enemies instead of hitting. It's awful. And you're almost better off just running past everyone while they try to attack you and catch up to you until you reach the area to start the mission. As soon as you click the button to begin, all enemies attacking you just sort of disappear. So if coins no longer grant you an extra chance, what are they for? Now there's lots of unlockable abilities you can save up coins for that make the game easier. Careful how you spend your coins unless you want to be miserable though. There's a couple points in the game where you cannot progress until you've bought a certain upgrade. I despise this. It feels like punishing me for not finding the upgrades the developers liked as interesting as them. It's punishment for making my own choices in an open world instead of the choice the devs intended. If you only want to make a level that can be beaten with a certain upgrade, then give me that upgrade in story. Or give it to me for that level. Don't halt all progression until I stump up enough coins because I was stupid enough to, for one example, decide I wanted Inferno Flop instead of the Alarm Clock. On the bright side, each of these abilities that weren't on Bentley felt great. They directly impacted the way I played and I was never disappointed by them. Bentley's though, man, I just stopped buying them. Worthless to a man before I gave up. Shrunk enemies keep hitting you, don't have less health, and deal as much damage. They're just harder to hit because they're tiny. Thrown bombs sound cool, but your chances to use them are effectively almost nil. At first I thought I could throw them, wait for an enemy to step on them, and blow them up sneakily that way, but nah, unless they're asleep, most enemies take more than one explosion to take down, and then they instantly know where you are. And the rest of the upgrades are like that too. Just stick to Sly and Murray for upgrades. And even then, Murray kills endgame enemies in 2 punches, so maybe just worry about Sly. The boss fight against Dimitri isn't a lot better either. Suddenly the game is pattern-based again like in the first game, but remember how getting the patterns and recognizing the telegraphs felt in the first one? Yeah, because you have a health bar now, there's a lot less telegraphing, a lot more attacks and damage that just feel unfair. The only boss this won't be true on is the absolute final fight, which will have its own issue, and the rhythm boss that they stole from Miss Ruby. Speaking of which, it's time to head out of France, Clockwork's feathers in tow. Now we're off to India, where the Spice Lord Rajan has put Clockwork's wings on display. This level might be the easiest, all of it leading up to the boss fight where Sly dances with Carmelita in disguise. His disguise, you ask? A tuxedo and black superhero mask. As in, one of the ones that they have in The Incredibles. You know, the ones it looks like a raccoon wears anyway! This was so dumb. I genuinely thought that Carmelita was playing along for some reason. Maybe to try to set up a sting or figure out what he was up to, but most likely because she always wanted to dance with him and it was a good excuse. But no! The game plays this totally straight that she had no clue. On top of that, the Ms. Ruby boss battle was fun, with banter between them and an awesome premise. This is as dull and dry as you would expect a formal dance to be. The most fun part, watching Murray get dangled from the ceiling and steal the wings, Mission Impossible style. isn't even something you can enjoy until you've watched the footage back, unless you're a glutton for failure. It feels like I'm being very harsh on this game, and I guess in some ways I am. When the game has its lows, they're really low. There's stuff that it just doesn't do as well as the first game, there are missions that just do not work, and there's some missions that are kind of miserable, again, especially with Bentley. Most Murray missions are straightforward, and play well into the new way the game handles. It feels like it was designed with him in mind, honestly. Things are still fun for Sly, with the properly designed levels compared to the last one being what weighs down other than one element. We'll get to that one later. But Bentley. Because he's the brains, his levels tend to be more nebulous and side quest based. This is where they stuck most of the alternate game modes from last time. The twin-stick shooter is back, as the constant need to hacking minigame. It's still as horrible to control as I remembered. Being told to hack something was met with nothing but groans and complaints. Not once was I excited to hack, just frustrated to see it again. Then there's the minigames, where you enter an area blind and have to activate traps that you don't know where they hit and fight off massive waves of enemies. If they get past the traps and onto you... There's even a boss fight with that mechanic. Then, of course, there's the RC chopper that controls as well as saying that phrase implies. Don't let it get shot. By the way, there's no way for it not to get shot. You avoid missiles by turning in a circle quickly, which puts you in the path of other missiles. Basic shots from the guns instead of missiles can't be dodged because they can't. They've already been shot. Just be lucky and not be where they shot anymore. It's almost impossible to line up dropping bombs because you're constantly moving in circles, and even when you want to move in a straight line, it's highly difficult at best. And don't worry, there's a boss fight with it too! Turret shooting on rails is always great as well, can't forget about that, and yeah, that gets a boss fight too, though that one's with Sly. In general, if Bentley's green icon is up in the sky, it's gonna be an unpleasant experience. What's counterintuitive though is how good this game can be. If the lows are slowly riding your brand new mountain bike through the worst part of the city at night, then the highs are like walking downstairs and finding a fresh plate of chocolate chip cookies and there's just enough milk left in the fridge for that tall glass and there's nobody else home to remind you you're already fat. When Sly's levels are properly designed, they outdo anything the first game had to offer by a mile. The unlockable upgrades let you customize how you interact with the world and really feel impactful for Sly. Playing Murray after dealing with Sly, and especially Bentley's fragility and difficulty fighting, feels like a power fantasy. It was like the opposite of Bentley. Seeing that pink marker over the city had me running to it with eager joy. I was finding myself so eager to get back on and keep streaming this game. I even almost played it a couple of times without gathering footage, just so I didn't have to worry about streaming when I wasn't feeling like doing that or it was at a weird time of the day. I didn't, but I just wanted to get back into this world to play more of the game. It was beautifully addictive and wonderful. Despite all of my complaints, it was a great game. I'm here to point out flaws. That is what I do. Because anything shines more brightly when you know the flaws and you can love it anyway. Since you never actually caught Rajan, the next level is also against him. And it was there I stopped even trying to collect all the bottles. The level designers created a lot of verticality to the levels with an extremely cluttered design that only gets worse as things progress. The levels are still imaginative and look really cool, but trying to remember where you have and haven't checked for bottles gets obnoxious, especially when some areas can only be gotten to from certain starting points. But there's 2 bottles off of that area, so you have to go back and find that starting point again, work your way all the way back up, and do everything over again just to get the other bottle. Add to that being constantly interrupted by enemies that have spotted you and force you to run and hide, and it's just not worth the hassle they've turned the collecting bottles into. Heck, sometimes just trying to navigate the world to find out where you're trying to go is a hassle in itself. Wake me up inside, can't wake up inside, save me from the bug that I must carry. But with persistence, you'll flood Rajan's spice operation. It's spice. Definitely not hard drugs.
Stop it. Get some help.
He knocks out Sly somehow. I'm honestly a little unsure how that knocked us out still. And that leaves this boss fight up to the Murray. It suffers from the same complaints I had about Dimitri, but when we win, we don't get the pieces of the heart. Instead, Neela, Carmelita, and another cop that's been mentioned before, the Contessa, appear at the lip of the pit. It turns out Neela was trying to frame Carmelita, and she, Murray, and Sly are all taken into custody at the Contessa's private facility, with only Bentley remaining. Of course. The next level has a beautiful gothic aesthetic, with interesting enemies and an obnoxious amount of unclear verticality, and worst of all, only Bentley for an extended period of time. You have to break out Sly, then the two of you break out Murray. It turns out the Contessa is a criminal too. Who would have guessed? She uses hypnosis to get criminals to reveal where the treasure is hidden while they're in prison, and she collects it all. She's also trying to use the clockwork eyes to make Carmelita take the fall for her actions. It was in the cutscene between the Contessa and Carmelita I realized how obnoxious the Fox's new voice was. They changed the voice actor from the first game, and not only did she lose her accent, but all tonal inflection and credibility as well. Thank goodness it looks like they brought in yet another voice actor for the next game. She used to be able to sound frustrated, intrigued, annoyed, playful, the whole range. Now, she sounds like an angry lobotomy patient, no matter what she is doing. Having the Contessa point this out does not fix it or make it amusing. It just makes me realize if I hear her shout, "I'll get you!" one more time, I'm going to mute my television. That'd be a real shame if I did that, too. If there's one thing you can always rely on this series to have, it's awesome music. Not just the expected overworld themes, but even the little sound effects that play are always perfect. The dum-dum-dum-dum-dum music in time with your footsteps as Sly sneaks around, the cartoon trumpet noise as you defeat an enemy, it fits in with each world seamlessly and pulls you deep into the gameplay. Then the actual level music itself hits you with perfect theming and you're hooked for good. Peter McConnell has composed music for a lot of games, some great, some not so great, but regardless of the game, I'm impressed with his range and talent. Once Carmelita is set free, it can't be hidden anymore that the Contessa was actually a crook. Her former lackey Neela comes in and brings an entire military force against her. This level contains one of my favorite lines.
"I'll slip into the crypts beneath the castle and put together a bad mojo bomb. It should be enough to destroy the Mind Shuffler. Sly, you capture a few local ghosts and drop them into Neela's headquarters. Hopefully the near-death experience will inspire her to purchase more mercenary firepower."
No matter what the situation, this game refuses to take itself seriously and is constantly keeping you laughing with the cartoon logic and plans. Pity I wasn't laughing when I had to pilot a tank. Saying the phrase, "this thing controls like a tank," about this machine's controls would be an insult to vehicles of war everywhere. It controls much more like a bad dream. You have a vague idea of where it's going to go, but no matter what happens, you know you won't like it. Once you finish the easiest boss fight in the game, as it's the only one that feels like it actually would have belonged in the first game, you head off to Canada to face Jean Bisson. He's a tough outdoorsman who was frozen in a glacier. Due to global warming, he thawed back out and has since begun a hate campaign against all of nature. Yeah, seriously, I can't say I blame him. If nature froze me for a few centuries, let my entire species get murdered so I was the last one left, then thawed me back out long after everything I knew and loved was gone, I'd probably respond the same way. This level's long. This guy has 4 different clockwork parts, 2 lungs, and a stomach are being used to keep his trains running forever. The map is completely open with cliffs and caves, so it feels much better than Prague. Carmelita is also on the run from the cops, but that won't stop her chasing Raccoon Tail. Overall, this first part of Canada would be a joy if it weren't for just one thing. Everything is leading up to a parachute section. This is a very expensive upgrade that I did not want. It wasn't interesting to me, and I hadn't bought it. I got very lucky that I had been saving up for a different item and was able to buy it when the game required it. As if I wasn't frustrated enough, then I got to use it. Use is a strong term. It suggests it was helpful, that I felt like I accomplished something with it, that it was, well, useful. But no, you simply cannot control yourself in the air properly, and woe betide you if thanks to the completely unhelpful camera you overshoot something. You cannot go backwards no matter what, and your turns are in huge, slow arcs that makes the hour hand of the clock during a long workday look like Usain Bolt. Being told to pull out this item for a mission makes me pine for Bentley, and trying to use it to land on a fast-moving train will leave you apoplectic. As if that wasn't bad enough, we then had to board each train. The last one is broken. This jump does not work. The entire thing is glitchy and barely functions. I finally got through when I resorted to mashing jump and catch at the same time as hard and fast as I physically could. To top all of that off, the boss is a shoot-'em-up boss battle between Neela and the RC helicopter. Oh, Santa Sucker Punch, how did you know what I always wanted? We get to spend a second level in Canada though. Not one to be stopped by our theft of the first 3 parts. Apparently, blind Jean simply moves back to a base camp deeper in the wilds. We follow after, determined to face him in his own lumberjack games to win the Clockwork Talons. While there, we find out the last member of the Claw Gang, Arpeggio the Parrot, has several parts and will be coming to pick up a giant battery that has been charged with the Aurora Borealis.
I'll handle this. You guys cover me.
After draining all of the battery's charge, we're able to hide inside of it safely. With everything going to plan, we compete in the lumberjack games. These are awful. Poorly programmed inputs and jumps just not working, with perfect play required or you're doing it again. All of it's for nothing, too, as Jean realizes that we've replaced the judges since we don't look anything like birds. He casually knocks us out, steals our parts, and puts us in an office to figure out how we got this close. Bentley breaks out, and for the second time in 2 sections, it's a Bentley boss. This time, the entire boss fight is telling Sly to activate different traps, and after a several second delay, the trap goes off. It's not really a hard fight, and it was the only time the traps were slightly fun. It still wasn't great, but while we were out cold, John already sold all of the clockwork parts to Arpeggio. They're gone. No, I have no idea how. Arpeggio has yet to arrive, and unless his skyship touches down, you can't find him or contact him except remotely, like wireless telephone. That's part of the issue. Here at the end of the game, the plot holes get dummy thick, even for cartoon logic. The parts are in Arpeggio's talons, and he's already rebuilt Clockwork. Then his blimp shows up to pick up the battery. Now I need you to hold on to the fact that the battery is dead. We drained all of the power out of it, and that's what lets us hide inside of it. I need you to hang on to that. After being picked up inside the drained battery and brought on board, Sly sneaks around the ship and finds the fully constructed Clockwork. He's being held together by a magnetic field, but he isn't functional yet. We reverse the polarity to rip him apart, and instead it fuses all of the parts together and makes him work again. That's not how magnets work. Neela is revealed to have been working with the Claw Gang all this time, and she and Arpeggio confront Sly, revealing their plan. Arpeggio cannot fly and never could. Shunned as a brilliant child thanks to this, he will use this eternal body to fly. But Clockwork was eternal because of the amount of hatred he had. No being can have that much hatred now, apparently, and so will still die. So Arpeggio created a plan. Rajan's definitely not drugs make people susceptible to hypnosis and violent outbursts. The Contessa created a flashing light pattern that would bring out pure, unadulterated rage and violence in anyone who had eaten the spice. Dimitri used his nightclub to spread the spice throughout all of Paris until everyone in the city was infected. And in order to run such a powerful light display, Jean had created the Borealis battery to power the entire thing. Arpeggio will put himself in the body of clockwork, fly his airship over Paris, set off the light show, and absorb the collected hate of a city to gain immortality. Laughing, he moves to enact his plan when Neela strikes. She betrayed the Cooper gang. She betrayed Interpol. She betrayed the Contessa. What makes the Claw gang different? She pushes over his little moving cage, and unable to fly, he can't escape. Inserting herself into the giant mechanical owl, she crushes Arpeggio underfoot, actually murdering him in front of us in a cartoon, and declares herself Kalakala. Did you plan this out beforehand? I like to think she stayed up hours into the night trying to plan out her new name in this enormous immortal form, and after all of that she settled on Kalakla. The dumbest name I could ever think of, and a little too close to cloaca. Well, whatever she's named herself, the race is on to take her down before she can get to Paris and become immortal. Except there's not. She can't become immortal. The entire plan hinges on the light show, which is run off of the battery we drained. The battery is empty. No power, no lights. No lights, no trigger for spice rage. No spice rage, no hatred, no immortality. We can literally just do this at our own pace. It doesn't matter. But this fact gets completely overlooked as everyone just acts with the utmost urgency, culminating in an on-rails turret shooter. Because anything else wouldn't have been dumb enough to honor the spirit of the first game's final boss. After shooting her down, she takes your friends with her. You, as Sly, have to jump from debris to debris, praying that the glide, shift, and camera angle haven't worked against you again to let you die. Once you catch up, there's a short, very easy boss fight on her back. She touches down violently. Still refusing to be defeated, you have to fight your way to her head, force the mouth open, and let Bentley grab the hate chip inside. The day is won. Justice prevails, and Bentley get out of her mouth before... yeah, that. In the most triumphant moment, Bentley gets his legs and possibly entire lower torso crushed. They pull him out, but Carmelita arrives. Sly makes a deal. His friends can leave, he'll turn himself in. They agree, and Bentley and Murray walk off, leaving their gear behind. Okay, again, hang on to this. It is specifically stated they left all of their gear behind. On the way to prison, Sly and Carmelita talk, almost having a date. But as the night drags on, she gets suspicious why the 10-minute jail ride has lasted several hours. Sly's friends using no equipment whatsoever, and while one of them was in critical condition bad enough that he will be in a wheelchair from this point forward in the series, made it to the helicopter, removed the pilot, and rigged the thing to fly in circles. He jumps out of the helicopter, carrying his cane and gliding on the parachute that apparently wasn't taken away from him when he was arrested. And that's the game. Oh boy, what a messy plot hole-filled ending. In the end, though, the plot holes and inconsistencies don't matter nearly as much if the game was fun. This isn't a deep game that wants to make you think, or is using mechanics to represent or make you feel. It's a comedy romp through a bunch of heists, and overall, the game was a blast. Yeah, it had moments that were more than frustrating, and even more that were downright miserable, but for each of those moments, there were two or more that would pull you right back into the story, and a world until you never wanted to leave. The things I hope that they change for the next game are everything involving the changed gameplay style, the degradation of the level design that's caused by the new focus on fighting, and the giant plot holes. I assume Bentley has to change given that ending, so he won't be part of that list. In the end, this game was a blast, and I can give it a low 8 out of 10. How much fun it is, and how much you just want to keep going back in and being pulled into the world, keep it from being a 7. 7 is just too low to be fair to it, despite the flaws holding it back from anything better than that. Wow, this has been a really positive month so far, hasn't it?
All of that for this game?
Come on, it can't be that bad, can it?